All right, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. It is 8 p.m. here in Washington, D.C. I'm Dan Cohen. This is Uncaptured Media. Uncaptured meaning the idea of staying free, of staying liberated from psychological operations, from traps, whether left or right, staying mentally, psychologically, spiritually, physically free. And um, one of the big traps, of course, that we are that is laid out for us in more sophisticated ways than I think many of us realize is the is Zionist propaganda. And today I'm gonna be discussing that with a very special, important guest who, if you haven't, if you're not aware of him, then you should be. This is someone who I've learned a great deal from over the past 4 or 5 months since I've been speaking with him, and if you, according to the U.S. Congress, this is actually one of the biggest anti-Semites in the United States, a very dangerous figure. In back in I believe in May, or was the the House passed Resolution 894, which declared that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So, based on that definition, my guest is one of the most virulent anti-Semites in the United States, maybe in the world, and it's an honor to welcome him. This is the the Grand Dragon Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. Welcome,
Thank
Rabbi
you very
Shapiro.
much, Dan. I can't in my wildest dreams imagine a more complimentary introduction. And a grand dragon, wow. And if anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, then it's a badge of honor to be an anti-Semite.
I just thought we'd do like a Heil Torah just to start the show. Um, but it's it's just too absurd. So it's a great honor to have you here, Rabbi Shapiro. I've learned a huge amount from you over the last, I don't know when we started talking, about 5 6 months ago. Since I reached out to you, um, and you've really enriched, deepened my understanding not only of Zionism, um, which I would like to consider. I mean, I've grown to dislike the term expert, but it's I mean, I've been dealing with it as a journalist since the beginning of my career in journalism a decade ago. But there were certain things I was missing, and now I have a better understanding, and which is constantly um, deepening, I would say, of the relationship between Zionism and Judaism, which, of course, Zionists would say are synonymous, but in fact, it's the total opposite. So, what my goal in this live stream, which we could speak for hours and hours, and we do speak by phone frequently, at length, but my goal is to disabuse my viewers of the notion that Zionism is not only is Judaism. We don't that I want people to understand that Zionism it's not that it's not Judaism, it's that it's the complete inverse, the complete opposite of Judaism, and that really Judaism is the greatest ideological threat or resistance to uh, Judaism is the greatest ideological threat and resistance to Zionism, and therefore Zionism wages a war against Judaism from which it derives its legitimacy. I would say even that Zionism is the highest form of anti-Semitism. So that's a lot to unpack, and I hope we'll be able to um, clarify a lot of that over the next hour or two. For all people following, please, feel free to comment, of course, and I will, super chats. I'll absolutely respond. If you want to ask Rabbi Shapiro or myself a question or make a comment, we'll have those live on air. And that kind of support makes this show possible. So I think maybe we could start, just get some basic definitions out of the way. If you could give, and it's funny we even have to do this, but just give a basic understanding or a basic definition of what is Judaism.
Thank you so much, Dan, for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Judaism is a religion. It's really, more accurately, a job description given to Moses and the Jewish people by God at Mount Sinai. After the Exodus from Egypt, in the book of Exodus in the Bible, the Jewish people assembled at the base of Mount Sinai, where God gave the Torah to the Jews through Moses, and that required the Jews to fulfill the 613 commandments. We know that there are 10 general categories. That's what is the world calls the 10 commandments. In Judaism, they're really called the 10 declarations. I'm not sure who referred to them first as 10 commandments. And our tradition teaches us that there were many souls of people who were not born yet, who were there at Mount Sinai as well. Those souls also accepted the Torah that God gave. It was totally voluntary. And those souls are identifiable when they're born because they will be born to Jewish mothers. In other words, the Torah is a job description. Judaism, and by the way, the word Judaism, the religion, was not called Judaism all the time. In the Bible, Judaism isn't called Judaism. It's simply called Torah. That's what it is. And the Torah, which is synonymous with Judaism, you could substitute one for the other whenever you like, was a set of commandments given by God at Mount Sinai for the Jewish people, or anybody wants to. Let me rephrase that. It was given by God at Mount Sinai to the people assembled there. The obligation to fulfill those commandments defined those people as Jews. They were then known as Jews. That's all a Jew is. A Jew is somebody who is commanded to fulfill those 613 commandments. The rest of the world, according to Judaism, which is a universal religion, it obligates everybody in the world to do basic commandments, basic mitzvahs, we call them, are commanded in 7 Noahide laws. You're not allowed to worship idols. You're not allowed to kill. You're not allowed to steal. You have to have some kind of some form of civil law. It doesn't have to be Jewish law, but some kind of law. You're not allowed to tear limbs off live animals and eat them. First, you have to kill the animal, things like that. There are other people, and anybody could volunteer to be one of these people. All you have to do is convert to the religion and accept upon yourself to fulfill the 613 commandments. Those who are required to fulfill the 613 commandments are Jews. Now, that's important note there, because in other religions, such as Christianity or even Islam, if you don't believe in the religion, so you have no connection with the religion. And the word Christian means somebody who practices the religion of Christianity. Same with Muslims. But the word Jew doesn't mean, in the sense that it's mostly used, somebody necessarily who practices the religion of Judaism, but rather somebody who is obligated by Jewish law to practice the religion of Judaism. So you could say, like, an American is not somebody that practices the American laws, but rather somebody who is obligated to practice, to fulfill the laws of America. So it's the obligation to fulfill the religious commandments, the 613, that grants a person the title Jew. It is also true that somebody who doesn't believe in Judaism is still obligated, whether he believes it or not. He's not what we would call a Jew in good standing. He's what we call in Hebrew a kofar. The Muslims have a similar word, kefer, which means the exact same thing. It means a disbeliever. A disbeliever, you cannot absolve yourself from the obligations through not believing, but you absolve yourself of various privileges of being a Jew. So that's Judaism.
And what about the philosophy behind it? I mean, the kind of the way that a Jew lives as commanded by the Torah in terms of pacifism, sort of an inward spiritual life, separate from Gentile society. Um, can you just kind of elaborate on that pacifist philosophy?
Sure, aside from the actual commandments, ritual commandments, things like that, there are also values that Judaism teaches. And there's an actual lifestyle that Judaism requires. Uh, Judaism requires one job description to work hard at fulfilling the Torah, studying the Torah, and that's our life. It's our life's mission. By way of analogy, if you've ever crammed for a test that you've taken in school, so for let's say those 2-3 weeks, you shut the door, you shut off your phone, you don't really have much to do with the outside world. Certainly, you're not going to waste your time playing around. You have a test that's very important in a few weeks. After we pass away, God gives us a test to see how much wisdom and uh, fulfillment of his will we collected, so to speak, on this world. So our lifestyle is very similar to somebody who's studying for a test. We have our own neighborhoods. The reason for that is, besides the distractions of what you may want to call the outside world, um, Jews never had sports. I mean, their exercise, but sporting events, uh, professional sports, certainly not architecture, things like that, science. There's nothing wrong with all of these things. These are fine pursuits, but it's just we're busy uh, studying and serving and praying and things like that. And one of the values of Judaism is uh, pacifism. We don't like wars. Killing is very bad. We we have a rule also, especially nowadays, that there's no temple. Jews are not allowed to fight wars. We're not allowed to have armies. We, of course, I'm sure you've heard, we're not allowed until the Messiah comes to have even a country, a kingdom. When we did have a kingdom, this is important to know, it wasn't the Jewish state. There's no such thing as the Jewish state ever. King David had a kingdom, but the purpose of the kingdom was to create the best environment, the environment most conducive to serving God and fulfilling the Torah. And if you have a religious man like King David, who was a rabbi, sitting on the throne, and not only that, you have prophets hearing the word of God and conveying it to the people. So the most if you're going to study for a test that takes place in the afterlife, the best way to study, if you are millions of people, is in your own country. So that's why they had a country, but it's not like the country is the homeland of the Jews. It's not like that's where the Jewish people were born. The Jewish people were born at Mount Sinai. They were created at Mount Sinai. Homeland, the word in English doesn't really say much, but the same word homeland in other languages uh, says exactly what the homeland is. In La Patria in French, fatherland, or Mother Russia in Russian, or in Hebrew, Moledes, which means the place that you were born, fatherland, motherland, or the place you were born. And indeed, in Israel's Declaration of Independence, all the way at the beginning, it says here, the nation was born. That's against Judaism. According to Judaism, the Jewish people became the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. We don't, it's possible that sometime during our history, we've had a kingdoms actually. It's possible that we've had once upon a time when it was permitted by Jewish law an army. But all of these things, the purpose of these things, anything that you use the description Jewish, the purpose of it is to better fulfill the Torah and serve God. And just one more thing on this point. The way the ancient Judea or ancient Israel was portrayed, because later they split into two countries. There was Yehuda and Yisrael. Okay, so that's, I don't mean the modern Israel. That's what the kingdom of Israel, that kingdom in those days, that it was called. The way they're portrayed and the way our kings were portrayed and our people are portrayed in the movies and the media and the storybooks, it comes from secular places. And there was a historian, Heinrich Gretz, who really was responsible more than anybody else for laying the groundwork for what's today modern Zionism, the modern Zionist idea of what the Jewish people are. The way it's portrayed is not the way our tradition teaches us that it actually was. The King David, King Solomon, these were not the way it's portrayed on the television. It's like, I don't know what, King David was a guy like Conan the Barbarian or Ragnar Lothbrok with a yarmulke on his head. But that's not really what he was. He was more like a saintly rabbi who won wars through supernatural powers granted to the Jewish people by God as a merit of their fulfilling the Torah. It was miracles. In other words, Jews in those days, this is all biblical stories. Wars were fought. Everything was done through miraculous means, just as Moses split the Red Sea for the Jews to pass through, just as he brought down upon Pharaoh's head 10 plagues, just as the manna fell in the desert. Throughout the period of our kingdoms, we had miracles as well. And I'll tell you a story. There was a great rabbi about 100 years ago. He died 1918. His name was Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, a very, very, very smart man, a very wise rabbi. And in those days, they had people, maskilim they were called. They wanted to modernize the Jews and secularize them. And they used to, one of the tools that they used to get followers was mockery. And they used to mock the Jewish people a lot. And they put on a skit, one of these comedy skits, a satire skit. And the skit was the story of the Jews going to war. So there was the Mashuach Milchama, the priest that recruits people to the army, and he follows the biblical rules. And he says to the people, okay, who wants to fight in the army? We're facing a war, facing a battle, and thousands of people volunteer. Then he says, all right, but we only allow very religious people in the army, only people that trust in God. People that do even a minor sin are not allowed to fight in the army. So many people leave. Somebody who just got married is not allowed to fight in the army. More people leave. Someone who just built a house. At the end of the recruitment, after getting rid of all the people that the Torah says are not allowed to fight in the army, there are only two people left for the army, Rabbi Soloveitchik himself, an old man, and another saintly rabbi, Rabbi Kagan. And it was funny. It was a funny skit. So some guys ran over to Rabbi Soloveitchik and told him about the skit, and they were like all upset. They were offended about how they were portraying us. And Rabbi Soloveitchik says, let me see the transcript. Let me see what they said. And he starts reading it, and he says, yes, this is true. And the next paragraph, yeah, this is true too. And he goes through the whole thing and says, everything they said is true, but they left out one part of the story. We won the war. According to Judaism, this is how the Jewish people won wars. We had saintly rabbis going out to war, and through miraculous means, they won. And if they sinned, they would lose. All throughout the Bible, you have the prophet Elijah, Elisha, the prophet, bringing down fire from heaven to incinerate his enemies and striking the enemies with sanverim, striking them blind, and with the armies of angels coming to help him. This is our religion. Judaism is a religion. It involves angels, it involves miracles, it involves, and more than anything else, is God. Judaism is a theocentric ideology. Everything leads to God. Anything that you use the adjective Jewish with, it means it has to do with God and the Torah, or God's law. And that's Judaism. It doesn't really change. It changes only in the same sense that, let's say, a computer program code would change when it says, if you press this button, then that should happen. If you press a different button, something else should happen. Else, a third thing should happen. And we have instructions that we derive from the Torah, what to do in various different circumstances, various different times, and various different places. And the program doesn't change. What the program wants from us sometimes changes. The 613 commandments remain the same. How to fulfill them and which ones are relevant. Some commandments are only relevant if you have a firstborn child. Some of them only if you own a red cow, as you know about those people. Some of it only if somebody who wants to divorce his wife. Some of them only if you live in the Holy Land. Some of them, but if you're poor, if you're rich, actually. So the Torah is the same Torah that was given on Mount Sinai. That's the same Torah that we're fulfilling today, interpreted through the methods that Moses received on Mount Sinai and handed down generation through generation till today.
So, I mean, I want to just help clarify the nature of Judaism a little bit more. Before we dive into its relationship to Zionism. When you say Judaism is is pacifist, but you're describing wars, biblical wars, how does that square? Because I
Two
think for a
things.
lot of people who might not understand, they
Okay.
see it as a contradiction. So please
Two
explain that.
things. The first thing is, as I mentioned, the biblical wars are not wars in the modern sense. They were fought by praying through to God, miraculously won wars. The battle, as the verse says, the Bible says, does not go to the strong. The victory does not go to the strong. It goes to the one who God favors, and therefore you need God to favor you in order to win a war. And it's not that the Jews in the olden days, the army, again, were not armies of strong men. It was armies of rabbis who, through the help of God, they were able to win war. So, for example, King David, he wrote the Psalms. Now, he was a king, and yes, he had an army. But if you look in the Psalms, he doesn't talk like regular kings in those days talked. He always talks about his enemies a lot of times in the Psalms, but he never says, I want my enemies' heads on a platter, or I'm going to kill them all. Nothing like that. He's always talking to God. God, please help me, protect me from my enemies. God, please help me. And that was the Jewish attitude towards war. We hated war. Sometimes we had to fight. Sometimes and even when we did, we had to ask a prophecy. We needed supernatural means, supernatural permission to go to war. It had to be something that we understood through prophetic means is God's will. King David says he doesn't speak about killing his enemies. He prays to God, please protect me from them. King David says in the Psalms that there's only one thing he asks of God in the Psalms. He wants to shivti b'veis Hashem kol yimei chayai. I should, please, God, let me sit in your house in the study hall all the days of my life, to stay there and not leave. That's what King David wanted. And just as, yes, Moses fought a war against the Egyptians, but the war that Moses fought against the Egyptians involved meeting plagues down upon them, involved dumping the Red Sea back on their heads after they chased the Jews in it. And those type of miraculous means were the ways and means that the Jews fought wars. Joshua and the walls of Jericho is just one example, and went throughout the Bible. So that's first. Second, as I mentioned, there are different times and places that Jewish law is applied differently, all according to the Torah's instructions. Nowadays, since we don't have kings, we don't have prophets, we don't have a Sanhedrin, we're not allowed to fight wars. In fact, not only are we prohibited to fight wars, the Torah tells us that it's not even in our interest. Even if we could fight a war and win, wars are bad. People get killed. And it's better to fight than run. Excuse me, it's better to run than fight. We are taught to act like to negotiate, to appease. We are taught not to fight. We'd rather run. Now, it's very simple. It's what you would tell your children. You would tell your daughter when she grows up one day, and you'll tell her that if she's, God forbid, accosted by a burly attacker, don't fight, run. And if he asks for your wallet, give him your wallet. Don't fight back. And even if your daughter tells you, but daddy, I think I have a 90% chance of winning, you'll tell her, just give him your wallet. 95% chance, 99%, just give him your wallet. Run, scream, something. What this, you know what it was? It was a much more practical. What we did was, what we did not have was the warrior ethos. The idea that makes you into a man, that makes you important, or that's something to be proud of, that winning a war, being stronger than the next guy. See, that's really the key factor over here. In Judaism, there are two things to be proud of: uh, scholarship and righteousness. That's it. Righteousness means, of course, is defined by God, and scholarship means important things, not silly things, that is important to God. That's it. Those are the people the Jews admired. To fight, uh, you know, it's a waste. It's a waste of time. It's a pity. If somebody has a good mind, he can do something with his time. Yes, we have to take care of our health, but to become a fighter, boxing is a sick sport. It's sick. People go in there and just beat each other up. I mean, from an objectively, from a moral and ethical standpoint, yes, I understand they do it voluntarily, but it's just, yes, even, I'm not saying it's it's oppressive. It's sick. There's a difference. These people are sick. And there are people cheering as a guy gets smashed in his face with somebody else's fist. That's disgusting to Judaism. And the idea that that warriors, whether in the boxing ring or a martial artist or a soldier, is something to admire. Yes, if somebody saves your life, you need to be grateful to him. But in terms of the warrior ethos, that a warrior is a important person, an admirable person, that is the opposite of Judaism. Absolutely not. The beauty and strength is in Judaism a zehu gibor, who is strong, hakovish es yitzroi, someone who conquers his own urges. That's what a strong man is to us. The This idea of manhood being associated with beating someone up, or being able to kill somebody, or being able to shove some sharp steel into someone's body, that is it's something that we look at and we tell our kids, don't be like that when you grow up. That's those guys. That's something for a zoo, not for a godly civilization. Now, the is that is that does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, I mean, generally it does. I mean, in part, I want to get on to the, kind of discussing the contrast with Zionism, but I think probably, at least for myself, like people start to understand the dissonance between what you're describing and, when you think about the state of Israel, which
Right now,
glorifies war and soldiers, and it's the complete opposite. So,
it's been said
go
that
ahead.
Israel is not a country with an army, it's an army with a country.
Right.
And I want to explain now the very close relationship that Judaism has with Zionism. Judaism is to Zionism like a disease is to its cure. Zionism was going to be the cure to Judaism. They designed Zionism not for self-determination. That wasn't the end game. It wasn't it wasn't to get rid of the anti-Semites, although they believed that would be a byproduct of Zionism. What it was designed to do is to create a new type of Jewish people, that's not as disgusting as the Jews I described to you. They don't like warriors. They don't want to be part of history. They don't want to be like everybody else. The Jews were intelligent people. They didn't want to be like the Cossacks. They didn't want to be like the Aryans. There's something the matter with them. That's how Zionists looked at the Jews. I want to read you something. I have a whole pile of books over here that I prepared for this discussion. Not going to use all of them necessarily, but I just want to read you one at this point. I'm reading from a piece in Arthur Hertzberg, The Zionist Idea. And this is from Micha Yosef Berdichevsky. He's talking about why there's a need for Zionism, okay? And he's talking about how the Jewish religion destroyed the Jews. Quote, apart from turning us into spiritual slaves, men whose natural forces had dried up and whose relation to life and to the world was no longer normal, this brought about a great interruption in our social and political development, an interruption that has almost led us to total decay. ... It cannot arise other than by a total overturn, that is, by a transvaluation of the values which have been the guidelines of our lives in the past. Our hearts, ardent for life, sense that the resurrection of Israel depends on a revolution. Jews must come first, before Judaism, the living man before the legacy of his ancestors. We must cease to be Jews by virtue of an abstract Judaism and become Jews in our own right, as a living and developing nationality. The traditional credo is no longer enough for us. ... Jewish scholarship and religion are not the basic values. Every man may be as much or as little devoted to them as he wills. But the people of Israel come before them. Israel precedes the Torah. Such a choice promises us a noble future. The alternative is to remain a straying people following its erring shepherds. Here's how it ends. A great responsibility rests upon us, for everything lies in our hands. We are the last of the Jews, or we are the first of a new nation. In other words, they hated these Jewish values. Make no mistake, they did try assimilating. Guys like Berdichevsky and people like him, they tried assimilating in the 1800s, but it didn't work. The problem was the anti-Semites persecuted them even though they were assimilated. And they didn't know what to do. They had this identity crisis. They were like, why do anti-Semites hate us? We're not like Yaakov Shapiro. We're normal. We would rather fight than run. We want to be strong men. We want to be normal people in the world, and not the way he described, studying, right? So there were various different answers they had. Jews should become communists, Bolsheviks, or whatever. And one of the answers, which ended up the dominant one, if only because European Jewry was almost wiped out, and in the Middle East is where this movement was taking place more than in Europe, and that's Zionism. The idea was nationalism. to change the Jewish people. How do we get, that was the question, how do we get the Jewish people to change their personalities? You heard what he said. A whole transvaluation of values. How do we get rid of this disgusting religion that holds us down from being normal people and be more like the Greeks or the Romans or the Italians or the Russians? How do we do that? And the Zionist answer was, let's rebrand the Jewish people. We're not going to be a religion anymore. The Jewish people are going to be a nationality. We're going to look at ourselves not as defined as a group of people that received the Torah on Mount Sinai. No, we're going to be a nationality like the Italians, like the French, like the Romans, like the Greeks. Yes, we could have a religion just like the Greeks worshipped Zeus. The Scandinavians had Odin. Everybody had their gods, and the Jews will have their religion too. That's not a problem. Let them have their religion if they want. There were other Zionists that said, no, Jews can have any religion they want. There was a disagreement amongst them. But one way or the other, the main thing is we're going to change ourselves into a nationality, and we're going to have new aspirations. Aspirations are no longer going to be the most righteous, to be the most scholarly, as you heard him describe. Our aspirations are going to be to win gold medals, to have the strongest army, to have the invent the most apps, the most startups, to have the nicest beaches, to show the world that the Jews could have something to be proud of, not like these rabbis. When we fight wars, it's not going to be like Rabbi Soloveitchik and Rabbi Kagan. We're going to have a real army, not this. They didn't believe in the whole story, not this mythological army, this pacifism. Oh no, we're going to have real army. We're going to have atomic weapons. We're going to be the strongest and the best, and we're going to be the opposite of the Jews. Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was one of the founding fathers of Zionism, Netanyahu today considers Jabotinsky his mentor. Netanyahu's father was one of Jabotinsky's, maybe his closest student, one of them for sure, him, Menachem Begin, guys like this. He said that if you want to know what a Zionist is, and he said this at a eulogy that he gave on Herzl when Herzl died in 1904, take every character trait that a Žid has. A Žid was like a slang, mostly used derogatorily, for Jew in Russian. Take every characteristic of a Žid, imagine its diametrical opposite, and that'll be a Zionist. A Jew is ugly, a Zionist will be handsome. A Jew is scared, is cowardly, a Zionist is going to be courageous. A Jew runs, the Zionist is going to look his enemy in the eye and say, I am a Zionist. I am a Hebrew. That's the word he used. This is what they wanted to do. They wanted to create people that are the opposite of Jews. They wanted to overcorrect for the Jewish disgustingness and decrepitness, to create an antidote to Judaism so that the world will see the Jews are not like Yaakov Shapiro or Rabbi Soloveitchik or Rabbi Kagan. They're not like the Jewish version of King David. They're going to be, King David is, we're going to tell the world that King David was a big muscle man that knew how to smite his enemies. And we're going to be a civilization. And we're going to change our values and our aspirations. And that was the goal. So if you want to know what a Jewish personality is, Orthodox religious Jew, you look at Zionists and imagine the exact opposite. And that's a Jew. That's not me talking. That's Jabotinsky. Jabotinsky's version of Zionism is the dominant version of Zionism today in Israel. He created the Cherut Party, which later morphed into the Likud, which is what we have today. Jabotinsky's Zionism is the dominant version of Zionism today in Israel. The Zionists' aspirations, their personality traits, their everything about them, their values is literally, and again, this is not me talking, this is them, the opposite of a religious Jew. And that's what they strove to create. And you know what? They succeeded.
Right. They, I mean, in many ways, it's. I think when people see the behavior of Zionists today, and especially powerful Zionists, whether it's Benjamin Netanyahu or Zionist billionaires like Simon Falek or Chaim Saban or figures like this. They or even they're basically they fulfill anti-Semitic stereotypes, and they become kind of walking, talking caricatures of anti-Semitic stereotypes. They appear, these Zionist billionaires. Well, they end up looking a whole lot like some kind of secret cabal that controls or has some kind of outsized influence in global affairs in countries all over the world. And that may be a sort of crude but not too far off description of what Zionism is today. But they, of course, claim to be Jews. I think of someone like Rabbi Shmuley Botiach, and I should put scare quotes around Rabbi Shmuley Botiach, who claims to be a rabbi, and you would think that would he claims to be rather a religious man. He's a diehard Zionist, and then he does videos where he's advertising his daughter's business, selling.
Okay, damn. All right.
I mean, I'm gonna refrain from saying anything non. But do you understand the point I'm making? That it's like this guy. This is so then people look at him and say, this is what Jews are pushing on us, selling adult products and saying, this is what Jews are pushing on us. And then, people like you, or just Jews, or people like me, who, whether I'm religious or not, many would consider me Jewish inescapably. And so they end up fulfilling Zionist stereotypes. So I don't know. I mean, how do you see that?
Well, the Zionists didn't only want to be Jews. It's not merely that they claim that they're Jews, they claim they are the Jews. Me and you, we're just Jews to them. They are the Jews. And if I could explain what Zionism, how it actually unfolded and what they actually did to to connect what they wanted to do to what we see today. It was a very big problem. You can't really take the Jewish people, which are a religion, people with no national characteristics. The Jews never had a national anthem, never had a flag, never had a common language. Yes, in biblical times they spoke Hebrew, but that's not what made us into a people. It wasn't like the national language of the Jewish people. In the Second Temple period, they spoke Aramaic. We didn't care really much what language we spoke, and for 2,000 years, Jews spoke all sorts of different things, right? The Syrian Jews spoke Arabic, French Jews spoke French, American Jews spoke English, and there are many Jews who spoke Yiddish. And in Spain, the Jews had their own. The Spanish Jews had this language called Ladino, which is kind of like what Yiddish is to German, Ladino was to Spanish. And they had no common ethnicity. They're Ethiopian Jews, there are American Jews, Yemenite Jews, German Jews. They didn't eat the same foods, they didn't speak the same language, they didn't have the same culture. You had a Yemenite Jew with a turban on his head sitting on a carpet, and a German Jew in a suit and tie. They couldn't even speak the same language. Yeah, they could, what language they could speak to each other? They could speak about the Bible and about the religion. That's the only thing they had in common. They wouldn't have a actual language to communicate in. The Yemenite Jews didn't speak Yiddish. They didn't speak German. They had nothing in common except one thing: the religion, the obligation to fulfill the 613 commandments, and if they were religious, the commitments and the practice of those, commitment to and practice of those 613 commandments. There was nothing there's nothing national. There was nothing in the Jewish people that resembled a nationality. So the Zionists said, we could change that. First, we're going to change Jewish history. We're going to change history, and we're going to say that the Jews who longed for a Messiah, the eschatology, end of days, Really what they wanted was political self-determination. Next year in Jerusalem, political self-determination. They changed that. What they did was they obscenely took a religion, Judaism, gutted it, took its husk, and stuffed the skin with politics and with nationalism. They kept the, I call it artificial Jewish flavoring and artificial Jewish coloring. They kept the symbols, they kept the husk, but the content was no longer religious, it was no longer spiritual, it was no longer godly, it was actually national. And they rewrote Jewish history about how the Jews always looked at themselves as a nationality. Then when the Enlightenment came, so they started looking at themselves differently. And as Germans of the Mosaic persuasion, but then the Holocaust showed them that that doesn't work. You're not really Germans. Jews are, therefore you have to be Zionists. We're our own nationality. And they, for over 100 years, they've been changing history. Gretz was the first one, more than anybody else. I have over here another book in my pile, The Making of Modern Zionism by Shlomo Avineri, who, in my view, was Israel's greatest political scientist. He has a section on each primary figure in Zionism, and chapter 2 is about Gretz. And here's what he says about him. More than any other piece of writing, Gretz's work contributed to the emergence of a worldview of the Jews as a nation and Jewish history as a national history. He says a few pages later, the programmatic significance of Gretz's position is enormous and revolutionary. The Jews are a people, a nation, not just a community of faith. They have a history, and Jewish national history has a meaning within the structure of world history. Judaism, moreover, has a political content as well as its religious belief system, and the messianic dimension of Judaism has clear political connotations, inextricably connected with Palestine. Many Jews who became deracinated from their religious and traditional background drew their historical self-awareness as Jews from Gretz's volumes. Biblical heroes who slumbered in Jewish self-consciousness for generations were revived and underwent a far-reaching process of emancipation, secularization, and romanticization. Perhaps more than any other person, Gretz contributed to the view of Jews as a nation. Today, his historical method can quite rightly be criticized as inadequate and highly slanted. Yet, it educated a whole class of modern secularized Jews to view their own history in terms relevant to a modern, secular, and highly politicized world. Gretz wrote a big history of Judaism. He got rid of God. And he and other Zionist historians, wasn't officially a Zionist in the classic sense, but he contributed to Zionism in that sense more than anybody else. And they changed Jewish history, they changed Jewish self-identity, and the Orthodox considered this idol worship. To take your Jewishness, which is something that's received from God, as something that connects you to God, and say your Jewishness requires this politics, this nationalism. It's no different than saying your Jewishness requires you to value a totem pole or an idol. It's considered, Zionism was considered to the Orthodox Jews idol worship. That means, according to the Jewish law, according to halacha, if somebody believes in Jewish nationalism, it's as if he believed the same thing that, I don't know, God is a totem pole or something like that. And that was the main objection that Orthodox had to Zionism. That's even without the army, even without creating a state. Creating a state is also prohibited, and having an army, waging wars are also prohibited. But Zionism existed before Israel existed. Theodor Herzl died in 1904. Jabotinsky never got to see the state of Israel. Zionism as an ideology means that the Jews are a nationality, and B, Israel is the state of that nationality. And Jews have no states because we have a relationship with God, not a relationship with a country, except our countries of residence, of citizenship. So the Jews considered, Orthodox Jews considered Zionism idol worship, and Zionism was designed to erase our identity. It was designed to destroy Jewish identity and replace it with some nationalist political identity, and to replace the Jewish personality and values. As Berdichevsky said, transvaluation of values came from Nietzsche, I think, that idea. But that's his language. Complete revolution in Jewish values, complete revolution in the Jewish character, complete revolution in Jewish personality. And today, by the way, Zionists don't even believe that Orthodox Jews looked at the Jewish people not as a nationality. They were taught that the Orthodox Jews, they also believe in a state of Israel, but not at this time when the Messiah comes, which is completely untrue, because what the state of Israel is today, the Messiah has no interest in creating. It's not a question of timing. While it is true that even a godless state of Israel, even a political construct that exists today, is also prohibited by Jewish law, that it at the same time bears zero relationship, zero resemblance to what the world or the Jewish people or the Jewish home is going to look like after the Messiah comes.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I think in terms of kind of debunking propaganda, and I think one of the more insidious ways that a lot of the debate among pro-Palestine people or those who consider themselves anti-Zionists is the use of the term Jewish supremacy to describe Zionism. And I hear this from journalists, from academics, people whose work I greatly respect. But I think it's important because we are in an ideological battle in many ways, a war of ideas, that we have to be very precise and intentional with our terminology, with the definitions we use. And that's why I think it's important to parse these. So I want to show, I want to show the tweets that I wrote, and I got some kind of sort of mixed feedback. I'm gonna just pull up my. Okay. Firstly, I'll just read what I wrote here. We can see. Zionism is not fundamentally white supremacy, nor is it Jewish supremacy. Because if it were white supremacy, all white people would be afforded privileges by the Zionist state. In other words, that would be the basis of your privilege, is your quote unquote whiteness, which is of course a social construct. It does exist inside Zionist ideologies, a secondary contradiction, which is why among Israelis, Jewish Israelis, that there is an Ashkenazi elite, and the darker your skin is, the lower your class. But that's all within Zionism, which is the primary contradiction. I say Judaism is a religion, as you've spent the last hour explaining. It is not and has never been a nation in the political sense, a race or a culture or an ethnicity. Anyone can convert to Judaism. However, no one can change their nationality, meaning where you're born, your race, or your ethnicity. The key thing here is this: the claim that Zionism is Jewish supremacy accepts the Zionist lie that Judaism is a race. So basically, by saying Zionism is Jewish supremacy, then we are basically accepting the Zionist definition. We are going along with Zionist propaganda. That tweet was, well received. My second tweet along the same lines, let me pull it up, was this one got more mixed reviews, even though I was sort of restating the same concept. Let me see if I can get this here. Okay. And this basically, I'm just saying, Zionism is Jewish supremacy is only true if we accept the false Zionist definition of Jew as a race, which we know it is not. That is the same thing that anti-Semites believe, that Jews are an inferior race, whereas Zionism says that Jews are a superior race. Both are false. And it's not about how religious you are. It's just your perceived belonging to this race. So again, anti-Zionists, pro-Palestine people, however you sort of define yourself, who use this, we reinforce Zionism in a way that I think people don't mean to, and they're trying to be critical, but they end up playing into Zionist hands. So I don't know. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay. So let me explain what Zionism is, and perhaps clarify for your viewers, because I not too many people know what I'm about to say. Israel is different than all the countries in the world. All countries in the world are the countries of their citizens, meaning America is the country of the American citizens. Italy is the country of the Italian citizens. France, the country of the French citizens. If you're here and you're not a citizen, you can have certain rights, but America is not really your country, right? Nationality and citizenship are the concepts are basically the same thing, or they're a total overlay on a Venn diagram. An American means America's your country. Because you're an American citizen, you are an American national, okay? Your ethnicity is a different story. Israel is different. Israel doesn't really exist except as a legal fiction by Israeli law. This is vital for people to know. According to Israeli law, there is no Israeli nationality. There is Israeli citizenship, but there is no Israeli nationality. According to Israeli law, there is only a Jewish nationality. What I mentioned previously, that the goal of Zionism was to change Judaism from a religion to a nationality. It was the state of Israel did not create a new Israeli nationality, a new Israeli nation. It is the nation state of the Jewish nationality by Israeli law. So that means, number one, there does not exist an Israeli nationality. There are Israeli citizens. But number two, whereas Israel could have been the state of its citizens by Israeli law, the nation state law, only Jews have rights to self-determination in Israel, in the state of Israel, not because Jews are superior to non-Jews. That's a mistake. If Israel would be the country of all its citizens, just some are superior and some are inferior by virtue of their being Jews, then that would be correct. But Israel, the country Israel, was designed as the country of a certain nationality, the country of the Jewish nationality, whether you are a citizen of Israel or not. There is no other country like that. The problem is not Jewish supremacy. The problem is the citizenship structure and the nationality structure of the state of Israel. If you are a non-Jew, whether you're white or you're Arabic, doesn't make a difference. You're Christian, you're Buddhist. If you're not a Jew, you are a citizen of Israel and you are afforded whatever civil rights citizens are afforded. But Israel's not your country. That means you have no self-determination rights collectively in Israel. Just as in America, if you are an illegal alien, you're not an American. You could have rights over here, right? But America is not your country because America is the country of its citizens, its interests. It was created for the interests of its citizens. Israel was not created for the interests of Israeli citizens. It was created for the interests of the Jewish nationality. Israel is a doing business name. Forget the word Israel. Israel does not exist. There is no nationality Israel. Israel exists as a legal fiction. There is some country called Israel, but really, more accurately, it should be called the Jewish state, or more than that, the state of the Jewish nationality. Now, this means, as I just said, that if you are a citizen of Israel, but you are not Jewish, Israel's not your country. Now, I'll tell you what this means. This means not only, there are all these lists of laws that give preferential treatments to Jews as opposed to non-Jews in the settlements and all sorts of things. I'm not even talking about that. I think that there's something more profound over here that goes over people's heads sometimes. And that is that nobody should be surprised that Israel would give preferatory treatments to Jews. Israel is the country of the Jews, just like America is the country of the Americans and Italy is the country of the Italians. Italy gives preferential treatments to Italians, and France gives preferential treatment to French. We're talking about citizens. That same logic to Zionists results in Israel being the country of the Jews. In the words of Netanyahu and Avigdor Lieberman, Danny Ayalon, this is how the Zionists put it. Israel is to the Jews what Japan is to the Japanese and France is to the French. And you could be a citizen of Israel, but so, for example, if the citizens of Israel who are non-Jews would one day become a majority and they would be running the country, that would be a problem. Israel would conceivably be legally allowed to take measures to make sure that never happens. Because Israel's the country of the Jews, imagine if illegal aliens in America, people who are not Americans by law, would one day take control over America. Well, we can't have that. America is the country of its citizens. You can't steal America from the Americans, although we give you rights. So too, non-Jews can't steal the Jewish state from the Jews. It belongs to the Jews. Now, whereas anybody can become naturalized an American citizen, how do you become a Jew? You see, if I move to Italy and I imbibe in Italian culture and speak Italian language and fly the Italian flag and sing opera music or whatever, Italian culture is, after 1,000 years, my children's children, they're regular Italians. In Israel, if you're not Jewish, you could be the biggest Zionist, like the Druze, for example, who are total Zionists. You could be a total Zionist. You could fight in the Israeli army. You could be a Supreme Court justice. Yes, certainly, and the individuals have such rights. But Israel will never be your country because you will never be a Jew, even after 1,000 years. And therefore, Israel would have a right to make sure that the demographic threat, which is how they call it, of non-Jews outpopulating the Jews should never take place, which is why they don't annex Gaza and the West Bank the way America did to Mexico when it became Texas, for example. And you take the Mexicans and now they're Americans. That Israel can't do that, not because of Jewish supremacy per se, but because the country is the country of the Jews, not the country of the Israelis. Now, therein lies the secret of Zionism and the secret to dismantling Zionism. It's very simple. If Israel would be the country of its citizens and not the country of this nationality, which, by the way, does not exist, there's no such thing as a Jewish nationality. Israel invented it. It's a fabrication. I'm an American national. My family's from Poland. What in the world do I have to do with some country? Even if somebody wants to claim that the Jews are a nationality, which they're not, they have no national characteristics. Why is Israel my country? See, Israel claims to be the nation state of all Jews, including Jews that don't live there. Israel has laws that give preferential treatment to Jews outside of Israel, in the sense that, in theory, if there's somebody that harms a Jew outside of Israel, they are subject to Israel's penal system. In theory, That's Israeli law, because Israel has responsibility. Again, this is their fantasies, but this is the way their law works. They're living in a bubble. They created a delusion of a Jewish nationality, and B, Israel being the state of that nationality. Everybody else are foreigners. Even citizens are foreigners, because whereas America, if you're an American citizen, you're not a foreigner by virtue of your citizenship. In Israel, if you're not this nationality, you are a foreigner in Israel. In other words, Zionists in America don't believe in Jewish supremacy. They don't believe that Jews in America should have more rights than non-Jews in America, the way, let's say, white supremacists believe that they are inherently superior to people who are not whites, no matter what country you're living in. It has to do with your race. But these Zionists, all of this supremacy that people are showing you, only applies in Israel, which is a strange thing for a supremacist movement. The answer to that strangeness, it's not really strange. It's the way it has to do with Israel, not the Jewish race. Israel the Zionists invented a Jewish nationality, and Israel is the state of that nationality. Now, many times, 3-4 times throughout Israeli history, and Israel's 75 years old, more or less, people went to court to challenge this idea. It makes no sense. It's intellectually inconsistent. In order to be naturalized into the Jewish nationality, which they don't believe being Jew is a religion, right? You need to convert go through a religious conversion. That's the only way to become naturalized into the Jewish nationality, even though it's not a religion. It's a weird thing. And there was a Supreme Court case in Israel. Daniel Refusion. This was the opposite case. Daniel Refusion was born Jewish, and he converted to Christianity. And he wanted to come to Israel based on the law of return because his nationality is Jewish. On Israel's identification cards for the registry, for the census, there's nationality Jewish, and then there's religion is a different category. So he said, my nationality is Jewish. I just practice Christianity. They had a Supreme Court case, and they said, well, if you practice Christianity, you can't be of the Jewish nationality. If you're an atheist, you can be of the Jewish nationality. Now, herein is the problem. One of the problems, the intellectual problems with the Zionist idea. There was another case, a guy Shalit, Benjamin Shalit, who was not a religious man. He was married to a non-Jewish woman, and they had a child. And he wanted to register his child as nationality Jewish. By Jewish law, even though family and tribal affiliation follows paternal lineage, religious obligations follow maternal lineage. If a Jewish man marries a non-Jewish woman, the child by Jewish law is non-Jewish. He wanted to say religion none for this child, but nationality Jewish. The Supreme Court of Israel agreed with him. It wasn't unanimous, but they agreed. There was such an outcry in Israel, they changed the law. They said that, well, for the law of return, you have to be Jewish, converted to Judaism, born Jewish, but you're not allowed to practice another religion, even though Hitler would have killed Daniel Refusion because he was born Jewish. Doesn't matter what religion you practice. By Israeli law, you're not Jewish. If you're an atheist, you are. If you practice another religion, you're not. They changed the law because of the outcry. Even though it was nationality and not religion that the category was, because there really is no Jewish nationality, there's nothing to base its qualifications on, its characteristics. So they changed the law. There were still other cases where people sued Israel, and they said, we want an Israeli nationality. I have in front of me over here, there were 21 appellants They came before Israel's court. The respondents were Ministry of the Interior and Attorney General, and they said they want an Israeli nationality. Israel is its own nationality, and whether you're Jewish or non-Jewish, you should have an Israeli nationality. So they ruled against them. They ruled against the appellants. They ruled that there's no such thing as an Israeli nationality. There's only Jewish nationality. And I want to read you some parts of the ruling and what it's based on. There are some Israeli courts first that said this isn't even a legal issue. This is an issue for academics. This is an issue for the population. This is an issue for to take place culturally, but it's not a legal issue. Other courts said it is a legal issue. So there's disagreement as to whether or not this whole thing is a legal issue. But when the courts decided, to the ones that decided to address the issue, when they didn't, again, there's several different cases. Quote, listen to this. The concept is from one of the justices. The conception that Judaism is not only a religious affiliation, but also a national affiliation is the foundation stone of Zionism. I'm going to repeat that. The conception that Judaism is not only a religious affiliation, but also a national affiliation is the foundation stone of Zionism. And if we say that there is a separate Israeli nationality, and as opposed to a Jewish nationality, then you're destroying Zionism. Israel is the state of the Jewish nationality. Here, standing contra to this conception that Judaism is only a religion, that's Zionism, and consequently, the national affiliation of Jews is only to the state whose citizenship they hold. The basic elements of this latter conception, that's what we Orthodox Jews always said, we're a religion and we're only connected with our country of citizenship, lie in the process of emancipation of the Jews in the Western Europe, when many of them began to define themselves as Jewish from the religious aspect only. They said over here, these judges were not aware of the history where the idea that Jews are nationality was invented, successfully disseminated mostly by Gretz. And they said that this is a controversial issue. Quote, on the one hand, is after the establishment of the State of Israel, this controversy changed its direction. On the one hand, the establishment of the State of Israel is the realization of the Zionist vision to establish a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Thus, the Declaration of Independence states that the land of Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people, and that is the natural right of the Jewish people to be masters of their own fate, like all other nations in their own sovereign state. Another one of the justices described the goal of Zionism. Justice Agranat. The Declaration of Independence states that, quote, the state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. This incorporates the mission of a melding of the diasporas into one people. I have only mentioned this in order to stress that the great event that was the establishment of the State of Israel did not happen to us so that a split would occur in the midst of the nation, Jewish on the one side and Israeli on the other. The principle of Zionism says that the Jews are a nationality and Israel is the state of that nationality. Again, and I want to comment on this one. This is from Justice Meltzer. Insofar as the Jewish nationality is concerned, it has been proved thus far that the seer of the state, seer like prophet, Dr. Benjamin Zev Herzl, was right when he wrote in his book, The Jewish State, quote, this is what Herzl wrote, "I think the Jewish question is no more a social than a religious one, notwithstanding that it sometimes takes these and other forms. It is a national question. We are a people, one people," end quote. The state of Israel was established and exists as a Jewish and democratic state as a solution for the Jewish people, which has solved, etc. Now, Justice Meltzer, cowardly, didn't finish the quote from Herzl. He says, Herzl said over there, "We are a people, one people. Distress binds us together."
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why the Jews are a nationality, Herzl believed, the only thing that connects Jews is distress, anti-Semites. Herzl said elsewhere that the definition of a Jew, Jewish nationalism is, well, everybody knows what a nation is, and a Jew is their identifiable group of people. Jewish nation is identifiable group of people held together by a common enemy, meaning the anti-Semite. Whoever the anti-Semite hates, that's a Jew, which is why anti-Semitism is so important to the Zionists. It's the only thing that makes them Jewish. Being Israeli doesn't make you Jewish, because that's what makes you part of this Jewish nation. Jewish law, well, it's not a religion. Whoever the anti-Semites say is a Jew is a Jew. Now, it's so confusing. And the reason it's so confusing is because Zionism never made sense. It invented a Jewish nation, number one. Number two, it's the only country in the world that claims that it is the country. It represents people who are citizens of other countries, such as myself. And Netanyahu came here to America when he spoke to Congress under Obama, and he said he represents not only the people that voted for him, but all the Jews all over the world. What kind of foreign head of state says he represents citizens of another state? There is no such thing. So they invented this Jewish nationality. They invented this type of country that's the country of the nationality, not of its citizens. And then third, the relationship between Jews and Israel is different than the relationship between regular countries and the people of those countries, whether citizens or nationals. About 20, 30 years ago, the Zionists started something that they call identity Zionism. Being a Jew is being a Zionist, such that if you're against Zionism, you are by definition an anti-Semite. And Netanyahu wrote in his book, Among the Family of Nations, it's called, something like that, that anti-Zionism, if you say I'm anti-Zionist, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm just anti-Zionist, it's the same as saying I'm not anti-American, I just think America shouldn't exist. Because Israel is to the Jews what Japan is to the Japanese. What's wrong is this Zionism. It's not Jewish supremacy per se, not at all. It's Zionism that twists the relationship between a person and his nationality, between a person and his country, and between the country of Israel and Jewish people and the country of Israel and its citizens. You want to destroy Zionism, Dan?
I do.
Here's how to do it. I'm serious. Look, some of these justices in Israel said that they don't want to adjudicate this question, that it's not something that belongs in court, because look at this one. The district court emphasized that the matter is not justiciable from a normative point of view, but it is not justiciable from the institutional point of view for a determination concerning the existence of an Israeli nationality has far-reaching, momentous ramifications for the image, the nature, and the future of the state of Israel. This determination is not the type of matter in which the court has a relative advantage over others, and it is not the court's place to make such a determination. Whose place is it? it's the academic circles, it's cultural circles. So listen, Zionism is an intellectual construct. It's a delusion. It's a legal fiction. Israel needs to become the country of its citizens. And if Israel becomes the country of its citizens, Zionism is over. If people understand that the Jews are not a nationality but a religion, Zionism is over. Zionism is an intellectual system, and it needs to be fought with intellectual pressure. We need to teach people the history. We need to teach people about these Supreme Court cases. We need to teach people that Zionism is intellectually nonsensical. We need to teach people the history of how Zionism, this idea that Jews are a nationality, how it was invented, how it evolved, who invented it, why they invented it. We need Jews to understand that Zionism is not their identity. And the only reason why many Jews think it is because they've been indoctrinated with this trash into thinking that it is. By the way, Herzl, before he came up with this idea of a Jew being a nation because of distress, he wrote in his diary, I have in front of me now this Herzl's diary.
Mm-hmm.
This was June 9th, 1895. He didn't think that the Jews would speak Hebrew in Israel. Language, he says, language will present no difficulty. Switzerland, too, is a federation of various nationalities. Quote from Herzl, we recognize ourselves as a nation through our religion. That's a quote from a Jewish sage 1,000 years ago, approximately, Rabbi Sajid Gaon. Einu moisenu uma el b'soirasa. The only reason why we are a nation or a society is only because of our religion. Our common religion is what unites the Jews, nothing else. Even Herzl knew that. Today, Israel's justices are saying that this was an emancipation invention, but it's not. If we need to fight the Israelis. Oh, by the way, one of the Supreme Court justices over there ruled in one of the rulings that you are allowed, although you cannot put nationality equals Israel, you are allowed to leave out nationality. You can't force somebody to have a Jewish nationality. So first step, all Jews, especially those in Israel where nationality equals Jewish is officially on their cards, on their identity cards, they should all renounce their Jewish nationality. Even if they don't want to say nationality Israeli, they should leave nationality out. Now, there was another justice, Meltzer. He said, no, you can't renounce your nationality as easily as you can your religion. It's like renouncing your family. So the Zionists can't even define nationality in terms of Jewish. They disagree on the definition of nationality. They disagree on the definition of Jew. They're all of these things, nationality, Jew, is Jewish state. They don't really have a intellectually consistent definition of any of these things. Number one, all Jews in Israel should sue to have themselves listed as nationality nothing. You can't force a Jewish nationality on me. Religion, Jewish, but nationality, nothing. If they don't want to put nationality Israeli, fine, then try to put nationality nothing. All Jews should say, there is no such thing as a Jewish nationality. And that's it. There is no such thing as a Jewish nationality. If enough Jews say this, and non-Jews also, there's no such thing as a Jewish nationality. The Zionists invented it. It's nonsense. It's not intellectually consistent. This Jewish nationality you cannot be part of if you are you practice another religion, but if you're an atheist you can. That's the law of return, and that's nationality according to Israeli law. None of this makes any sense. People need to know this. Jews need to know this. People who aren't Jews need to know this. Zionism needs to be mocked. as much as it needs to be opposed. It needs to be mocked because it really is mockable. Now, you know who's going to try to prevent this from happening? One, the Zionists, obviously, but two, the anti-Semites.
Right.
Because the anti-Semites and the Zionists both agree that the Jews are a race or a slash nationality slash tribe slash something just more than a religion. In fact, Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, chapter 2, he says Jews are not really a religion. They claim they're just a religion, but they're Germans. It's not true. He says the Jews lie. And he says, if you don't, any doubt that I had that the Jews were lying was put to rest by the Zionists. Among the Jews, there's a movement called Zionists. They claim that the Jews are a nationality in and of themselves. Right? So Hitler said that the Jews are not real Germans because the Zionists say so. Anti-Semites, especially the neo-Nazi type, alt-right type, white supremacist, nationalist type anti-Semites are
I'm
going.
an example of that right now. Go ahead.
What?
But go ahead.
They're going.
I'm showing an example of that exact phenomenon you're talking about right now.
There you go. Real Jews are Zionists. Judaism's entire endgame is Zionism. Exactly. Here's a rule. If you the Jews need to understand this. I got to tell you something. I speak out against Zionism all over the place. And there are Jews that tell me, because they're indoctrinated, if you say something bad about Zionism, the anti-Semites are going to hate the Jews because they're going to think that Jews are bad. Because of Zionism bad, that makes Jews bad. I said, no, just the opposite. The anti-Semites want Jews to be Zionists.
Exactly.
There are two groups of people. I always say this. I was quoted in The Guardian saying this. Two groups of people want to conflate Judaism and Zionism. Zionists, in order to legitimize Zionism by saying that it's Judaism, and anti-Semites, in order to delegitimize Judaism by saying it's Zionism. I once, who once wrote an article about me saying that I'm a liar and nobody should believe me, all these things I say about Zionism? David Duke. David Duke on his website, I think it's called davidduke.com. He wrote an article after I made a video. This was, I think, 9 years ago. It had like 400,000 views. And David Duke wrote it on. I said, Judaism is a religion. Zionism is a political ideology. We have nothing to do with Zionism. I have no more to do with Israel than I have to do with China. It's very simple. David Duke said, I'm lying. It's not true. Don't believe him. Yaakov Shapiro really has nothing against Zionism even. He just doesn't want his people to serve in the Israeli army. But they're all Zionists, really. And the Orthodox Jews, the settlers, they're all Orthodox Jews. Yes, they are. They are Orthodox Jews. But coming to an Orthodox Jew like me and pointing to the settlers and saying they're also Orthodox Jews is like going to the Pope or the Catholic Church and saying the evangelicals are also Christians. Yes, these are Christian. The Christian Zionists are Christians, and the Pope is a Christian. But the Pope will say it's not my religion. So too, Jews who are not Zionists and Zionist Jews, whether they be Orthodox or not, and there's a lot of overlap there. Yes, we both don't do work on Saturday, and etc. But they are practicing a form of idol worship, aside from their not working on Saturday. It's a different Zionism is a different religion than Judaism, as far as I'm concerned. And anti-Semites want Zionism because they want the Jews to be Zionists. They don't want Judaism to be a religion. So the anti-Semites and the Zionists are both going to oppose what I'm suggesting. And what I'm suggesting is that more and more, this is what needs to be emphasized. If somebody doesn't like what Israel is doing, fine, complain about it, protest, do whatever you want, no problem. But in the long term, if you want to undo Zionism, this is the quickest way to do it. It's already been in Israeli court, and it's already been debated. The cornerstone of Zionism is that the Jews are a nationality, and two, all of this thing that people perceive as Jewish supremacy, it's only because of this citizenship structure, the nationality structure, which is nonsensical and absurd. We need to call it out for what it is. Once that happens, once Jewry, world Jewry, and people who are not Jews publicly say, no, the Jews are not a nationality, they're religion. Even if you're not religious, if you want to say, I don't know what, it's bagels and lox, say it's bagels and lox, but we're not a nationality. And Israel is not my state. Israel's not the country of the Jews. This is a much stronger pressure, intellectual pressure on the core tenets of Zionism will be much more effective than any boycotts or economic pressures, regardless of how successful people think the boycotts and economic pressures will be. And once Zionism falls apart, Israel, this is the goal, needs to become the country of its citizens. I saw a video somebody sent me with Elon Pappy.
Mm-hmm.
He was on a podcast, and the host actually looked like an Orthodox Jew. Asked him, do Jews deserve a state? So he said, no. Religions don't deserve, Christians don't deserve a state. The Muslims don't deserve a state. The Jews are a religion. Religions deserve to be respected, and you deserve to be able to practice it. But that a religion should have a state, Zionism says that Judaism is nationalism, and he made that distinction. I want more people to make this distinction. I want more people to say that. I want people to attack and mock the way it deserves to be mocked, the core tenets of Zionism. There is no other country in the world like that claims to be the country of citizens that have people who have nothing to do with Israel. And there's another talking point that the Zionists make that this exposes as a lie. You know how you hear from the Zionists always that there's only one Jewish state and 24, 27 Muslim states or Arab states?
Right.
That's not true, because there's not a single Arab state or Muslim state in the sense that Israel claims to be a Jewish one. There's not a single Muslim state that claims to be the nation state of all Muslims, that the Muslim Ummah is a nationality and it is the state of that nationality. There's not a single Arab state that claims to be the nation state of all Arabs, not a single Muslim state that claims to be the state of all Muslims. Israel's own definition of a Jewish state means it is the nation state of all Jews all over the world. And in addition, their prime minister and other dignitaries are saying that it's actual cradle of Jewish identity. There is no country that no Muslim country that if it doesn't exist, that's as if the Muslims don't exist. If I say no Muslim is going to tell you, if you don't want Saudi Arabia to exist, then you're anti-Muslim. Because if you say Saudi Arabia doesn't exist, it's like saying I'm not against America. I'm against America's existence. I'm not against Americans. No Muslim is going to tell you that about any country. Israel's the only country in the world like that. That needs to change. And the only way it's going to change if we know it's a scam. If we know about this scam and we explain that it is a scam, it's over. Israel only exists as a legal fiction in the deluded minds of people that don't really see what's going on. Israel's happy when people say that it's Jewish supremacy, because that distracts from what Israel really is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the state of Israel is anti-Israeli, and until it accepts Israeli nationality, I mean, then it's just a walking. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Israel needs to exist. The problem is not Israel shouldn't exist. The problem is Israel doesn't exist as a nationality, as it doesn't.
In
It
that
makes
Zionism, so what you're saying is Zionism has created the Israeli nationality, but
it
through
created the
Zionism, the
Israeli
Israeli.
is the Jewish nationality.
Right, right. Well, it has created the Jewish nationality, but needs to recognize the Israeli nationality, because obviously we're not just gonna, go back in time
Right.
where,
Right. Israel
so
needs this court decision needs to be overturned, and it needs to be overturned. The way it can be overturned is by taking the talking points of these justices and showing them that it's not true. Better arguments can do that. But even if you don't want to make an Israeli nationality, let it be the country of its citizens and not the country of the Jewish nation. That's all. Let
Mhm.
Israel be the country of the Israelis, not the country of the Jews, right?
Right,
That, for all
right,
practical purposes, means an Israeli nationality. But what we want is for Israel to be the country of the Israelis, not the country of the Jews. Then they'll be able to do with the Palestinians what the Americans did to the Mexicans when they made it into Texas,
right.
and you'll have the governments will be. I mean, the truth of the matter is, there are those that say, in fact, in the Israel's court cases, some of the justices mentioned this. It comes from Amnon Rubinstein that the Palestinians won't want to live in a democratic Israel if it's called Israel. Fine. So change the name. Call it Charlie. Call it Holy Land. Call it Herzlstan. Call it whatever you want. But let it become like America or Australia, or all you got to do. People say all the time, if you say Israel shouldn't exist, you're an anti-Semite. You're allowed to criticize Israel's policies. That's that's a scam, because Israel's existence is only a policy on paper. I answer these people, fine, no problem. Let Israel exist. I just want to change one policy. The policy is that Israel's the nation state of the Jews. Change that to the state of the Israelis. That's all. Change that
Right.
policy. Well, what do you mean? If you do that, Israel doesn't exist anymore. So listen to what they did. They created a fake Jewish nationality. Then they created a fake a country that's not really a country, but it's an idea. That if it's a policy, they created a policy that if you disagree with the policy, you disagree with the existence of the country. If you change the policy, you destroy the country. It's all a fantasy from beginning to end. All of Zionism is a fantasy. I really, really believe, and I've studied Zionism for all of my adult life and most of my adolescent life as well, which is a very long time. And um, I'm not a whole lot younger than the whole state of Israel. I am, but not a whole lot. And this is the quickest way to dismantle Zionism. Israel is not really a country in the same sense that other countries are. It's a policy. It's an ideology. Once you get rid of that ideology, Zionism disappears, and Israel is no longer Israel. Well, it is Israel. It's not the Jewish state anymore. And then you have peace.
Right. The big lie. I mean, it's the big lie is gone, and then it can be a normal country where everyone, who lives there can be part of it, instead of imposing the genocidal apartheid regime in order to maintain it.
How ironic. Israel, it's such a failure. Part of what they wanted with Israel is that Jews should have a safe place. Turns out Israel is the most dangerous place for Jews anywhere Jews live all over the world. In the Global Peace Index, every year, like, Israel is like 180 out of 200 countries in terms of peacefulness, meaning there are only about 20 countries less peaceful in the world than Israel. Mexico is not one of them. Mexico is more peaceful than Israel. Um, the main goal was to normalize the Jews. What they did was they created the most abnormal country in the world with an
Mhm.
abnormal identity for the Jews, something an absurdity of a country, because the country is not a country. The country is just an idea. It's a legal fiction, Israel.
I mean, some of what you touched on is sort of, I think, describes like almost like a psychosis. Um, that, at kind of a national level. But there's this tweet I came across, and I tweeted about it a few weeks ago, that I want to show, that I think, just
Mhm.
kind of encapsulates it. If you see this, I think you saw this. Okay, so this is from Gabriel Groisman.
Okay.
Gabriel is the son-in-law of Simon Falek, one of the billionaire or oligarchs. He owns the duty-free airport shops all over the
Oh,
United States. And
really?
so he funds both Democrats and Republicans in the United States, and he funds Netanyahu and the Kahanists. So, this guy is a very uh his father-in-law is a very serious guy. This guy was also he was the mayor of a town or a city in Florida. Big Zionist, kind of powerful guy. And he
What's his
says
name?
this guy or
This guy,
or
this
his
guy.
father-in-law, Gabriel Groisman.
He was a mayor. He was a mayor in Florida?
He was a mayor in Florida. I mean, we could
Okay,
I can tell you exactly
that
where.
doesn't matter.
Okay. But he's not just like just some nobody guy. He's not like some just random AE pie frat boy. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so he's wearing, he's obviously dressed in a totally secular way. And he says, people told me to be careful walking around New York City as a religious Jew. I say, here I am. I will never cower in
Oh,
fear.
I
Okay.
remember that. Yeah. Go
I
ahead.
mean, firstly, I'll just give my comments on it. Firstly, I don't know if he's in the airport, like if he's in JFK or LaGuardia. It kind of looks like it. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if this on the left is like the departures, so this is like such an obvious photo op. So he got someone to take a picture of him from behind. He's dressed in a way that no religious Jew dresses, and he has a Star of David on the back of his jacket to advertise as loudly as possible, I am a Jew, trying to draw as much attention as possible, and nothing happened, and nothing happens to him. So it's just like this. So what he's trying to do in my mind is manufacture anti-Semitism, so then he can say we are persecuted, and that's why we need the state of Israel as a, quote unquote Jewish state. So it's this whole
Right.
psychosis. But
Right.
yeah,
Fear
go ahead.
fear-mongering is one of the things that is necessary to sustain Zionism, because aside from its absurdity, it's also not sustainable. If Zionism was made and, all the original, Zionists and original Zionists in 48, everybody was talking about how, we need Israel because Jews are persecuted all over Europe, and Herzl even, "Distress binds us together." I'm not distressed. I'm living fine in America. Thank the Lord that I have a place like America to live in. I've been walking around the streets of New York, and I look more Jewish than this guy. I've been walking around every day since before he was born, and you know, I'm very very happy here. Can I tell you a story in upstate New York, Muncie? You surely heard about it. I think it was 5 years ago. uh, there was a maniac came into a synagogue of a Rabbi Rottenberg with a machete. He murdered somebody and he maimed others. I know Rabbi Rottenberg, uh, and he told a story in his synagogue that he was contacted by the state of Israel, by Israeli Zionists. I don't know exactly who, but people wanted him to move to Israel. They'd give him anything. They'd give him anything if he'd moved to Israel, because they wanted uh, to show people that America is not safe for Jews. A guy came into a synagogue of this rabbi who's been here. He's an American. His father, I think, was American too. I remember his father spoke English without an accent. I think the father was also American, which is, unusual for somebody back then. Uh, Rabbi gets attacked. He moves to Israel. That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted to
Right.
happen. They wanted a showcase, and he told his people. So I told them, "What are you, crazy? America is much safer than Israel. Why would anybody want to go to Israel for safety reasons? That's insane." And that's what these guys want. These guys are fear mongering, but you see, it's more than just. It is true. that they need that to get a supply of Jews and to justify their existence. But more than that, remember, according to guys like Herzl, there really is no definition of Jew. Their whole Jewish identity is empty, save for the fact that anti-Semites hate them. You have that video of Al Dershowitz?
Yeah.
Can you show your viewers what he says over there? Al Dershowitz was asked, "What's a Jew?"
Okay, you ready?
Yeah. Listen to Al.
I know I will disappoint you when I say there is no single essence of Judaism, that Judaism changes and varies generation to generation and location to location. I hate to admit that I think one of the greatest unifiers of Jews throughout the world, tragically, has been anti-Semitism, has been negative attitudes toward Jews. As Elia Ehrenberg once said, "I will remain a Jew so long as there are anti-Semites." That is a negative aspect of Judaism, to be sure, but we live in a very negative century. After all, we live in the century of the Holocaust. We live in the century where the Germans trying to kill a whole race of people who had very little in common with each other, many of whom did not even define themselves as Jews. It is too early from the Holocaust. It is only 40 years since its end for us to try to think of more positive definitions of Judaism. We live in an age where 3 million Jews are held captive in the Soviet Union because they are Jewish. We live in a day where, according to just yesterday's New York Times, there is still considerable anti-Semitism in this country. Let's work on that problem first. Let's first try to eliminate the negatives. Let's first give us the freedom to be positive Jews the way we can. Let's try to build bridges and live in peace. Let's try to build bridges between the Black communities and the Jewish communities, the Arab communities and the Jewish communities. Then we will have the luxury to sit back and think through positively what it is that brings us together. And in the end, we may find that there is very little that brings us together. In the end, we may find that Rabbi Kahana and I have less in common than I have with some of my Cambridge colleagues, or Rabbi Kahana has with some of his other colleagues who are not Jewish. I am not searching for the silver thread that brings us together.
Okay, did you hear that?
All right.
So, yeah, did you hear that? This is Al Dershowitz. This was 40 years after the end of the Holocaust. Obviously, he's much younger there. That would make it 1985, okay? In 1985, he had a debate then with Mayor Kahana. That's what was going on there. And they asked him, what does it mean to be a Jew? You're not religious. What is it? So he says, it's too early to think about that. We're just 40 years after the Holocaust. There are millions of Jews behind the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. Let's first... we're in the century of the Holocaust. It's too early after the Holocaust to think about what a Jew is. Let's first deal with the anti-Semites. And as he quoted somebody, didn't remember even who he said it from, that as long as there's anti-Semites, I'll be Jews. I'll be Jewish. And at the end, after all these anti-Semitism problems are solved, it may turn out that I don't have much in common with Mayor Kahana. I have more in common with my Cambridge friends, meaning that was 40 years ago. That was 45, 44 years ago, okay? There are no more Jews behind the Iron Curtain. It's not the century of the Holocaust anymore. He said 40 years is too early. Now it's 84 years, all right? He's getting older, Al Dershowitz. And still, they haven't thought of a better definition of what a Jew is. You see, and Zionists need anti-Semitism not only to justify Israel's existence and the sacrifices that they need to make, never mind the Palestinians, from their own perspective, from the biggest Zionist perspective, the biggest Zionist, the sacrifice that they make to sustain this operation. What are they doing this for? Why are they doing this? I mean, yeah, look what's going on, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Israel. Why are they doing this? Well, this is, anti-Semitism. Jews have to run there, which is insane. But it's more than that. It's their identity as Jews. Without anti-Semitism, what makes them Jewish? And don't forget, a guy like Al Dershowitz, this is not a downtrodden guy who grew up in a bad neighborhood, this is this is a Harvard law professor, right? This is Al Dershowitz, and he's
This is a buddy
saying,
of Epstein.
but he can't figure out what makes him Jewish, and maybe there's nothing except anti-Semites. And it's too early after the Holocaust, only 40 years. Well, guess what? It's 45 years since you said that, 44 years since you said that, and you haven't come up with a definition of Jew. They need anti-Semitism to be Jewish. And don't forget, first they invented this Jewish nationality, but they have not defined what it means to be Jewish. The definition that they give by law is self-contradictory. You can be an atheist, but you can't practice Christianity, but being Jewish is not a religion, okay? Two, they made a state, a country, that's not the country of its citizens, but the country of this nationality, including people that have no connection with the country. There's no country like that in the world. And now they need anti-Semitism, without which Jews don't exist, and the whole nationality doesn't exist, and Israel has no... Israel doesn't exist. Remember, without that, they need it, and everything is based on anti-Semites hating them. It's so insane. All of Zionism is insane. Jews are still living in the 1950s in Leon Uris's Exodus book, where, you know, the Zionists are just blonde-haired, blue-eyed heroes, big, strong, you know, Western heroes, John Wayne kind of types, and they're fighting these primitive Arabs, and they're still there, and Israel's wonderful, and this is all before 1967, of course, Leon Uris, you know, and Israel's just wonderful, and now there's not going to be any more Holocausts anymore, and Jews are safe. They're not safe anywhere in the world except Israel, right? And then that's it. And I remember there were, and look what happened. And look what happened. Look where we are now. Yeah, 44 years ago, Al Dershowitz is talking like this. It's 44 years since then. It just gets increasingly crazier, more dangerous there. It's the biggest failure. I mean, yes, so you got the Zionists are going to say, look at Israel, how many tall buildings there are, how many apps they invented, the economy that they made in such a short time. All that is true, but success and failure of an enterprise is measured against the achievement of their objectives. And the objective of Zionism was to, well, if the objective was to create a new type of Jew, they did that, but that's not what they were looking for. They were looking to create also like a safe place and normalize Jews. Theodor Herzl said that as soon as Zionism gets the last page in his book, The Jewish State, last page is the climax of the book. Leo Pinsker said the same thing in his pamphlet Auto-Emancipation. As soon as Zionism gets off the ground, said Herzl, anti-Semitism will disappear off the face of the earth because Jews will be normal. They never understood anti-Semitism. They never understood being Jewish. They never understood any of these things, and yet they made a country with nuclear weapons and an actual real army with bombs and planes and guns, and they fight wars based on smoke and mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to know how
Right.
to stop them? Yeah, you could work on stopping the planes and the bombs and everything. You could try that. Or you could just get rid of the smoke and mirrors. You could just expose it for what it is. I'm not telling people to stop complaining, you know, if they don't like what Israel's doing. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that what these guys did in Israeli court, that has a better chance in the long term of getting rid of Zionism. All Jews should say have nothing to do with Israel. And you know, one more thing I must add, that this idea that Israel claiming to be the Jewish state is a scam, even anti-Zionist Jews, I'm talking about the leftist anti-Zionist Jews, they fall into that trap as well. Because when they come and they say, look at me, I'm Jewish, and I am on the side of the Palestinians, I understand. I've had this discussion often. I understand that the Palestinians want them there, and because that way they are more immune to charges of being anti-Semites. I understand. And they want them there because that feeling what I call the Jane Fonda effect, you know, where
Mhm.
even but the problem is that by doing so, the side effect is that you are feeding into this idea that, yes, I'm Jewish, and therefore I have more standing to speak about Israel than somebody else. And if I'm against what Israel's doing, that is more meaningful than if a Christian is against what Israel's doing. And that itself is Zionism. The idea that you as a Jew, because you're a Jew, are connected to Israel is Zionism. And yes, if you want to, I'm not telling you not to complain. Go ahead, do it. But if you want to specifically showcase yourself as a Jew in order to give your anti-Israel position extra weight, the price you're paying for doing that is you're reinforcing Zionism. Because really, my approach is, hello, I have nothing to do with Israel. Why are you people come to me all the time and ask me what I think about what's going on in Israel? And if I have an opinion, absolutely. But if somebody comes over to me because I'm Jewish, I ask them, why are you asking me as opposed to the guy next door? Because I'm Jewish? If you're asking me what's going on, what I think about what's going on in Israel because I'm Jewish, that makes you a Zionist. Because you think that my opinion means more or is more, because if you say I'm Israeli, that's fine. I lived there, that's fine. You think I know something about the topic, that's fine. But you're asking Jews, the question is, what do you think about what your country is doing? Or
Right.
even I met a guy in Midtown Manhattan, didn't speak English. He turns on his iPhone, Google Translate from some language that I didn't notice. The translation said, encouragement for your country. And I look at him and I say, Israel? So he nods his head. I said, no, I'm American. Israel, not my country. America, my country. All Jews need to do that. The anti-Zionism of Jews, yeah, you know what? Yeah, anybody can have any opinion about America's bombing of Afghanistan, about any war, anything, and you can have strong opinion. No problem at all. But anti-Zionism needs to include, if you want it to be successful in the long term, and you want to destroy Zionism and defeat it, anti-Zionism needs to include the idea that I'm American. I have nothing to do with Israel. Again, the cornerstone of Zionism is that the Jews are a nationality and Israel is its state. That needs to be negated. The Jews are not a nationality, and if they are, Israel's not its state. Israel has nothing to do with me. Asking me what I think what's going on in Israel is the same as asking a Puerto Rican Baptist. My opinion is no more relevant because I'm Jewish than that of a Puerto Rican Baptist. That anti-Zionism must have that if it's going to succeed. It must have what Elon Pappy said, what I saw today, that no, the Jews are not a nation. The Jews are a religion. It's not a nationalism. It must have that, and therefore they have nothing to do with Israel.
Right. Right.
With
I
that,
mean,
we can defeat Zionism.
right. I mean, I've seen you deliver that argument to a number of on a number of different platforms, and it's been received in, I think it's by kind of, anti-Zionist, secular, left-leaning Jews, um, in they've had a hard time swallowing it, or just, kind of processing it. But I think it's absolutely the correct argument. I mean, throughout, as long as I've been involved in Palestine, journalism and Israel Palestine, and I got to say, it was not fundamentally my involvement in the issue was not fundamentally because I was raised, in a Jewish reform community. But that played a part of it only because I realized I was lied to, and so that kind of angered me. But it didn't mean that I felt like my opinion um, carried more weight because I'm a Jew, or I'm perceived as a Jew, or whatever it is. It was really just outrage about, not only being lied to on a personal level, but about what was happening. Um, and so I always avoided trying to, emphasize or highlight my Jewishness or perceived Jewishness in order to bolster my argument. And I, it felt like I would be tokenizing myself. And in the same way, I think people would look at it weird if somebody was, in I don't know, in the ISIS era, to say, if there was like a Muslims against ISIS group, those, that would be kind of strange. Like nobody really, only very very few, maybe neocons and real anti, Islamophobic racists tried to associate ISIS with Islam. But and that was, ISIS propaganda, is to say we are the Islamic State. But that has very much succeeded in the minds of opponents, critics of Zionism. We a lot of internalized that. And the one time I will say that I did slip in that was actually on October 7th. I had a viral tweet saying something like, "I'm a Jewish guy who had my bar mitzvah in Israel. I support Palestinian resistance." Blah blah blah. And it was really an emotional reaction to what was happening. Because I've got videos from someone in Gaza of the military jeeps being taken by Palestinians for a joyride through Gaza. I didn't even quite understand the scale of what had happened at that point. I just saw this stuff, and I was like, this is an incredible moment. The concentration camp inmates escaped and got out, and whatever happens from here, this is a incredible historic moment. But it really actually is not about me being Jewish. It's just a human thing. And I think anybody who understands what Gaza is, um would have the same kind of, or it would be totally understandable for them to have the same kind of reaction. And so it's like it's a human thing, not it really has nothing to do with religious background or affiliation or belief or theology or anything like that. So that was the one time that I slipped, and I, kind of, I mean, that's Twitter. Stuff comes out quickly and people make mistakes.
You
But
have
yeah,
60
I mean,
minutes to edit it.
I'm sorry.
You have 60 minutes to edit it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess I didn't. I didn't think about it then. It took me. It wasn't really until it wasn't really until I heard you lay out the argument that it really solidified in my head why that was a mistaken way to put it. Even though there was something that kind of felt uh, off about it in a way, and when, like I said, it was an emotionally driven comment. But nonetheless, I think what you're saying is absolutely right, in the sense that the more we portray this as a Jewish issue, Israel as a Jewish issue, as an intra-Jewish issue, then we're playing into the premise of Zionism. That
Yep.
that's exactly what it is. So even if it's not, saying, it becomes, we're basically playing tug of war with their game. It's their game, so we legitimize the other side. Like the left wing Jewish side or whatever is, well, we need to be nicer to the Palestinians, stop committing genocide, stop killing them. And the right wing says, no, 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 we have to do that. Look what they did to us. And you end up playing tug of war. And like I said, you legitimize their position, when really the correct thing to do is to just let go completely, and then they pull and fall down. And then
Yeah.
they lose, and that's it. And you see, I mean, as you've described, it's really, Zionism is not Judaism. It's a total falsification of Judaism. And then you see, the man behind the curtain, and it's like this whole thing is just totally fake.
The man behind the curtain is right. And that description that you gave in the uh, disagreement between the right wing and the left wing, you said the left wing says we have to be nicer to them, and the right wing says no, we don't have to be nicer to them. Everything that's the right wing and the left wing arguing, and the easiest way to just correct that is get rid of the word we and replace it with they.
Exactly.
There's no we. I have nothing to do with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's not a believer. He's a kofar. I have nothing to do with him. Yeah, you know what? I think his family was Polish, and so was mine. That's my connection with Netanyahu. We're both Polish. We're both from Polish descent. That's my closest connection with Netanyahu. That's it.
I thought he was
What?
Lithuanian, which would have made him my,
Oh, maybe
my descent, but I could be wrong. I
you
don't
could
know.
be right. I'm not 100% sure. Milikowski, I'm not 100% sure. But I have nothing to do with these people. Jews, anti-Zionism means, you see, anti-Zionism doesn't mean you're against particular things that Israel does, because Zionism doesn't require inherently doing something at all vis-a-vis the Palestinians. So, for example, let's say there would be a two-state solution. Let's just say, right? It's impossible, really, in reality, but let's assume there would be, okay? And let's assume the Palestinians are happy. Let's assume they get 95% of the land fully militarized and fully free, and Israel remains with 10% of the land in the Negev desert, okay? Guess what? If you're an anti-Zionist, nothing changed. Israel is still the same Israel. It's still the same Zionism. It's just that Palestinians are out of the line of fire. So there are many people that describe themselves as anti-Zionists, but really it's not Zionism that they have a problem with. It's Palestinians getting hurt they have a problem with. And I understand them perfectly. But that's in a two-state solution, you would still have a Zionist state with all the policies claiming to be the state of the Jews. The only difference is the Palestinians would not be in the line of fire. So let's not confuse being against Zionism with being against what Israel is doing politically. One, you could have one, you could have the other. You could have one without the other. But if you want to defeat, the only reason Israel's doing what they're doing is because of Zionism.
Right.
If you defeat Zionism, you get rid of all the problems.
Right.
But if you get rid of the problem with the conflict with the Palestinians, you're not going to get rid of Zionism. And that will just have more problems later on. And by the way, like historically, if you notice, the more the two-state solution became an impossibility, as its possibility decreased, Israel's nation-state law and identity Zionism, as they call it, became increasingly stronger. Until 1992, I think it was, they didn't even mention Israel as a Jewish and democratic state officially. 2018 was when they made the nation-state law. And the reason for this is not a coincidence. It was Ehud Olmert who said that, and again, this is because of the unique absurdity that is Israel, that if the two-state solution would go off the table and there would be a movement in Israel to give everybody equal rights, like there was in South Africa, Israel is dead. That's what he said, Ehud Olmert, Israel's prime minister back then. So the two-state solution is what keeps people distracted from saying, okay, let Israel become Herzlstan and give everybody equal rights. It's such a funny thing. In every other country, if people don't have, in America, the black people didn't have equal rights, the women didn't have equal rights, but when people got more equal rights, it was an improvement in the country, right? Everybody was happy. In any country that's unequal, that's oppressive, and you give people equal rights, you just improve the country. In Israel, if you would give all the citizens equal rights, the country no longer exists.
Right.
How absurd is that?
Right.
You give them equal rights. You don't give them equal rights. That's one thing. But if you give, this is what Israel is. If you give all the citizens equal rights, colorblind to Jew, non-Jew, whatever, you just destroyed Israel. That's what the Zionists claim. I mean, if you want people to have equal rights, you want to destroy Israel. You're an anti-Semite.
Right.
This is what people need to understand. And I believe you can defeat Zionism without one casualty.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it goes right to the heart of it. It is the central contradiction of Zionism, but, it's something that, the Palestinians of Gaza are unable to address, or, the Lebanese who are, under threat of some massive war. So this is something that, really Jewish Israelis have to take up. It's a project for them.
It is.
So, okay, well, we've been going more than 2 hours now. Anything else you feel like is essential to get out, or maybe we should save
We'll be
for a
another,
next stream?
we'll be here another 2 hours. I think
Yeah,
we should
exactly.
save it for the next stream. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's been very enlightening. The comments have all been very, very positive. So thank you very much, Rabbi Shapiro, for doing this, for taking the time to do this with me. And thank you everyone for listening and for the contributions. We'll definitely do this again. I want to make it a regular thing. I think, you know, Rabbi Shapiro is a voice that needs to get out there more, and people need to hear the arguments that he presents, the knowledge, the expertise, because there's really, I mean, I don't know anyone else who has this kind of understanding of Zionism and Judaism, and is, and goes on to podcasts and YouTube and Rumble shows with whoever will have them. So again, I just want to thank you, and I also want to encourage everyone to check out his book. I'll do a shameless not self promotion, but The Empty Wagon. This, I'm in the middle of this thing. If you order a copy, it'll be in better condition than mine. Mine's been getting a lot of reading, but I mean, it's a book. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, but it's actually, it's for, as I understand, yeshiva students, like Jewish seminary students. But so you might have to sit and look up some Hebrew words on your phone, but a lot of it, I think is still very, very useful. It's about how Zionism stole Jewish identity, and it's I think one of the best works I've ever seen on Zionism, and an essential read. So I really encourage everyone to check out this book, The Empty Wagon.
Thank you so much, Dan, for having me. I really appreciate the kind words, and thank you for the plug for my book.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I look forward to it, to doing this again, and thanks a lot, everyone, for joining.